de mi Borinquen hermosa, por eso la quiero yo tanto, por siempre la llamaré preciosa. Yo sé de sus hembras trigueñas, sé del olor de sus rosas, por eso a mi tierra riqueña por siempre la llamaré preciosa. Isla del Caribe, isla del Caribe, Borinquen, preciosa te llaman las olas del mar que te baña, preciosa por ser un encanto, por ser un Edén, y tienes la noble hidalguía de la madre España y el fiero cantillo del indio bravío lo tienes también. Preciosa te llaman los bardos que cantan tu historia. No importa el tirano te trate con negra maldad. Preciosa será sin banderas, sin lauros ni gloria. Preciosa, preciosa te llaman los hijos de la libertad.
Buenas noches and bienvenidos. I'm Milagros Marrero Johnson, and I am the Director of Strategic Programming at the UConn School of Social Work. As we gather to acknowledge this year's Hispanic Heritage Month theme, Esperanza, a celebration of Hispanic heritage and hope, tonight's program, Human Rights, Health, Self-Empowerment, and Hope in Puerto Rico, is a true testament to the never-ending strength, resourcefulness, and resiliency of the Puerto Rican people. As we know, the celebration of our culture, language, history, values, and beliefs is celebrated by our community year-round. Even in the face of unthinkable adversity, intense economic struggle, and escalating political tensions. We are indeed a proud people, a people of significant achievements, and a people fiercely loyal to our cultural legacy. We appreciate you joining us and are delighted that so many of you are here for such an important and critical conversation. As part of today's program, I ask that you please submit questions in the Q&A. Panelists will respond to as many questions as possible. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator, my colleague, Dr. Rebecca Thomas. Dr. Thomas is a full professor at the UConn School of Social Work and the director of the School Center for International Social Work Studies. Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Milagros. Good evening to all of you, and welcome to Hispanic Heritage Month. As Milagros mentioned, this year's theme is Esperanza, a celebration of Hispanic heritage and hope. And we have a very special event planned for you today. Two colleagues and scholars will be presenting on the topic of human rights, health, self-empowerment, and hope in Puerto Rico. They will be presenting on the activist actions and resistance of the people of Puerto Rico, especially women, as they continue to face social, economic, environmental, and cultural factors affecting their everyday lives. I think like a Puerto Rican, I said our. But at this point in time, I'm just going to tell you how we structure this presentation. Each of our colleagues will have 20 minutes to present, And so we ask each of you to write your questions in the chat. And at the end of the session, we will have an opportunity to respond. Marianilda Rivera Diaz to present first, and I will give you a brief synopsis of the extensive work that she has been doing. Dr. Rivera Diaz is the professor at the School of Social Determinants of Health, doctoral program of the Graduate School of Public Health, and she's also an affiliated researcher and a coordinator of the International Health and Sovereignty Working Group of the Latin American Council of Social Sciences. Dr. Rivera Diaz serves the official delegate for the Latin American and the Caribbean region of the International Federation of Social Work's Education Commission. Dr. Rivera Diaz has an impressive educational background. She completed an HIV and stigma postdoctoral training in collaboration with the School of Medicine, University of Puerto Rico, and the School of Public Health at the University of Michigan. She's received many awards, but recently she received the Hispanic Clinical and Transnational Research Education and Career Development Award from the National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparities. She has multiple publications, including 3 books entitled Invisible Citizens, Childhood, Politics, and Mental Health in Puerto Rico, published in 2014 in Spanish, Human Rights in Health and Social Work in Puerto Rico, an urgent essay for a proposal of action, published in 2018 in Spanish, and more recently, HIV Migrants and Human Rights, International Perspective, in 2019, and this of health of the people of Puerto Rico. And it's definitely been reflected in our academic and research work. On topics tied to HIV, neoliberalism, globalization, health inequity, and social determinants of health. These have been presented in innumerable forums at local and international levels. She's collaborated with various professionals, academic and community organizations, and is very much linked to the advocacy for human rights and the right to health. This evening, Dr. Diaz's presentation will focus on the recent socio-environmental emergencies such as hurricanes and COVID-19, which continues to cause a great public health as natural disasters, with these large-scale destructions and causing large-scale destructions in Puerto Rico. These events have made visible the need to evaluate the political, social, and economic forces contributing to the violations of human rights and the rights of the people of Puerto Rico. The spirit and the actions of resistance and activism gives hope for the future of human rights and health of the people of Puerto Rico. And at this point in time, I'm going to ask Dr. Rivera Diaz to start her presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Thomas. Well, first, I would like to thank to the University of Connecticut, the School of Social Work, and my friend, colleague, and compatriota, Dr. Catherine Medina, for inviting me to celebrate the Esperanza, the hope in the Hispanic Heritage Month. It is a great pleasure for me to share with all of you some reflections that I have been working with colleagues, great colleagues from Puerto Rico and other corners around the world, such as Dr. Nilka Muñoz, Licenciado Juan Correa Luna, Dr. Joan Benac, people from the Alliance for People Health, the College of Social Work Professionals of Puerto Rico, and the International Health Working Group of the Latin American Council on Social Science. They are very committed to build a new path to address human rights and the right to health in Puerto Rico, but also around the world. Addressing the human rights and the right to health in my country requires a deep conversation on the fundamental historical and contemporary structural problems that cause those unfair, unnecessary, perverse, and preventable conditions in our Puerto Rican society. Those conditions are produced by our system, political and economic forces that shape our life, defining who will be healthy, who will have access to education and other human rights, and who deserve to live with dignity. There is no other way to understand the present if we do not know our history. Puerto Rico consists of an archipelago of islands in the Caribbean that has been characterized as the oldest colony in the world. According to José Trias Monge, a lawyer who also was a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Puerto Rico, he states, "For most of our life as a nation, the history of civil and human rights in Puerto Rico is more the story of their absence and mockery than the story of their development. Puerto Rico colonial status has adversely impacted social, economic, and cultural aspects of life on the island, including the fundamental human rights of our people. On 1898, and as a result of the Cuban Hispanic American War, Puerto Rico was transferred as a war prize to the US, who imposed a military regime and later a civil government. On 1917, US Congress passed the Jones Act legislation, imposing citizenship to all Puerto Ricans as part of the American colonial project in the island. It provided 8,000 Puerto Rican men to fight in the First World War. The Jones Act and the Merchant Marine Act of 1920 also restricted Puerto Rico to develop its own economic model. It imposed the use of the US Merchant Marine, one of the most expensive on the world, for the transport of goods. According to a study carried out in 2019, these cabotage laws represent a rise of 1,000 million annually in the price of products sold in the island. And it's continue strangling our economy and impoverishing the living condition of people. In December 10, 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. And 2 years later, Puerto Rico wrote its own constitution, including the Section 20, that recognized the right to health as it was conceived in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Despite the fact that the will of people of Puerto Rico was to include the right to health in the Section 20, the approval of the Puerto Rico Constitution was conditioned by the Congress, among other reasons, to the elimination of that section. Although Puerto Rico was able to draft its own constitution, sovereignty and complete control of Puerto Rico fundamental affairs remain in the hands of the US President and its Congress. As a result of the creation of the Constitution and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico was taken from the list of colonies under the United Nations and therefore from the international scrutiny. Reason why today we are internationally recognized as a non-incorporated territory instead of a colony. During the first half of the 20th century, anti-colonial and resistance movement emerged to face the political and social repressions. However, they were controlled by repressive law, arrests, and some of them were murdered. Other important facts in our colonial history linked to human rights, particularly the right to health, was the military test for over 6 decades on Vieques Island using chemical agents such as Agent Orange, and the use of the island as a bombing range and site for military training exercise, resulting in high rates of cardiovascular, diabetes, and cancer diseases, with higher rates than in the rest of Puerto Rico. Dr. Medina has a publication talking about those health inequality in the people of Vieques. Also, the medical experiment with contraceptive pills during the 50s and the birth control with mass female permanent sterilization without Puerto Rican women's consent during the 60s and the 70s. there is a very important documentary film called La Operación, that shows the mass sterilization experience faced by our women. Puerto Rico colonial status has adversely affected the population's civil and human rights recognition. Is the value human dignity. Even thought in the 1960s, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted the resolution 1514-15, which recognized that the continuous system of colonialism prevents the economic development of dependent people, and this regimen is against the United Nations ideal of peace. The US Supreme Court has consistently declared that it can treat Puerto Rico differently in comparison with other states of the Union due to its non-incorporated territorial condition. Recently, in June 2016, the US Supreme Court in Puerto Rico versus Sanchez Valle legal case restated that although the US Congress conferred Puerto Ricans the authority to create its own constitution, the ultimate source of sovereignty resides in the US Congress. Beneath its image as the Pearl of the Caribbean, our country has been for decades a laboratory where colonial and neoliberal practices has been institutionalized, social control, oppression, racism, and social and health inequality. Interestingly, on the same week of the US Supreme Court decision made on the case of Sanchez Valles, the Congress of the US imposed the Puerto Rico Oversight, Management, and Economic Act, called in Spanish by the acronym PROMESA. PROMESA was approved despite a sound opposition from the people of Puerto Rico. It has allowed the federal government to appoint 7 unelected board members, we call La Junta, the board, that control the finance of Puerto Rico and impose fiscal austerity measures affecting labor rights, healthcare, education, including the University of Puerto Rico, the pension system, and other essential public services, and the privatization of highway and electricity system in order to pay $72 billion on public debt. It is worth asking ourselves who the PROME is for. There is no doubt that this action opened a new stage of colonial control and neoliberal policies imposition. These fiscal austerity measures have had devastating effects on the poorest people on the island, meaning less access to job opportunities, more informal work with lower salaries, and worse working and living conditions. Undoubtedly, the poverty and inequality will continue increasing, as well chronic physical and mental illness, with poor services responding due to our very privatized and precarious healthcare system. After 69 years of the constitutional approval, the right to health as well other human rights has been violated, but the struggle for the recognition remains. It was clearly demonstrated on the recent socio-environmental emergencies, such as Hurricane Irma y Maria in September 2017, earthquakes in 2020, and the current COVID-19 pandemic. These socio-environmental and public health catastrophes made visible the worrisome socioeconomic situation of our country as the aftermath of the colonial regime with the local government consent. The lack of local and US government response during the hurricane, for example, resulted in more than 4,000 deaths, even though the local government said that there were only 64. Studies on the mortality impact of the Hurricane Maria has shown that most municipalities with an excessive mortality rate were in the poorest areas. 70,000 families lost their homes. More than 250,000 homes suffered serious damages, and many of them in the middle of pandemic times are still living under blue awning on their roof. In addition to material damage, destruction, and poverty, Hurricane Irma and Maria has caused avoidable deaths, untreated illness, and mental health problems. The hurricanes didn't didn't only strike the homes, but also the mental and emotional stability of our people. Studies have shown that a significant proportion of our population has symptoms of post-traumatic stress, anxiety, depression, and suicidal thought. For example, a government report for the period of November 2017 to January 2018 showed that more than 3,000 people had attempted suicide, an increase of 246% on the previous year. Although the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, declared Puerto Rico a disaster zone, relief and rescue operations were very limited, with severe consequences for the health and life of the local population. The hurricanes almost destroyed the ailing Puerto Rican electric system, allowing La Junta, the board, to accelerate the process to justify and implement the privatization plan that was formally operationalized last June. I remember a phrase used commonly in the media that said, Puerto Rico se levanta, Puerto Rico rise up. But many organizations and human rights activists prefer to say, Puerto Rico siempre ha estado de pie. Puerto Rico has always been standing. And it is because its people and our sense of community. The hurricane's experience demonstrate the lack of effective action and corruption of the state and the importance of the relief work organized in the community. For many people, our country is resilient. However, we prefer the word resistance. The history of Puerto Rico, as all of you have seen, is the history of resistance. People respond to the legality of unequal treatment for Puerto Rico by the USA government result in the rise of civil and human rights activists and other community-based groups that historically and more recently has been demanding the full recognition of their constitutional and human rights, recognizing that this colonial regime produced social inequality, including inequality in health. According with Joan Benach, a colleague from University of Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, inequalities in health are the differences in health indicators that occur socially, since their origin is political, economic, or cultural, and that they are unfair since they are generated through unacceptable situations that must be and that can be avoided. This inequality is associated with higher level of unemployment, precarious jobs, and instability in jobs, chronic health conditions, less access and availability to health services, low access to education, among others. In the case of Puerto Rico, all of these determinants has been present for decades. While thousands of families were still under the recovery process of the hurricane catastrophe, the earthquakes in January 2020 and COVID-19 pandemic on March of the same year arrived in the middle of a deep socioeconomic, fiscal, and financial crisis. And again, were local community groups and organizations, as well the diaspora, that respond to the emergency. I remember how the College of Social Work Professionals of Puerto Rico joined many other professionals and community organizations to support the communities in the south side of the island that were physically and emotionally devastated. The earthquakes faint memories of the hurricanes and the government mismanagement to deal with emergencies. Many people woke up on January 6 and 7 with all the efforts made ruins. No houses, no water, no electricity, no schools. The lack of response to the country already weakened infrastructure by the previous hurricanes aggravate the condition for the people of the south side of the island. No waiting for government response, Puerto Ricans, as did in the past, took the streets to help, meeting basic needs, offering professional aid services and transportation to victims, and rebuilding homes. And is that what it, and as if that were not enough, in the middle of the emergency, a government warehouse was discovered filled with water, expired food, and other emergency supplies from Hurricane Maria that were not distributed to the population. This was not the first government warehouse discovered. At least 4 warehouses full with unused aid from Hurricane Maria were found between 2019 and 2020, while our population suffered the needs and died. 2 months later, the COVID-19 arrived. It was March 12, 2020, when coronavirus lockdown was implemented in a context of the earthquakes, social and economic recuperation, including the aftermath of the hurricanes. Recognizing the difficulties of thousands of families to be able to comply with the lockdown requirements to the everything that I previously explained, and the lack of social approach in the management of the pandemic, once again, groups, social organizations, community activists, and professional associations constitute the People's Social Task Force. This task force was in response to some areas that were not being considered by the medical task force created by the local government to manage the pandemic. The groups denounced the lack of recognition to the reality of poverty and inequality that the country faced, making it impossible to stay at home as requested by the lockdown. Food insecurity, unemployment, domestic violence, emotional and mental instability aggravated by the confinement, added to the aftermath of past emergency, were some of the demands. The crisis was not the cause of the coronavirus. Its lethality doesn't necessarily lie in it, but in the living conditions created by this colonial and economic system that have made us survive artificially, depriving us of living with dignity. The historical context of social survival imposed by economic forces of neoliberal globalization, plus the political colonial context, inevitably contribute to the violation of the human rights and the right to health of our people. Recent examples such as Hurricane Maria, earthquakes, the COVID-19 responses, and Promesa expose how colonial laws limit our actions, having implications for the health and the life of our people. The colonial and neoliberal ideology, as mentioned before, devalues human dignity. This ideology doesn't take seriously the importance of human rights, and recognizing human rights means putting people at the center of all political decisions and treating each person with the dignity and respect they deserve by placing the common good over the profit interest. The esperanza, the hope, is that Puerto Rico has developed sustained collective action that generates public awareness and has diverse social movement here and in the diaspora that advocate to change our reality. That is why talking about esperanza, talking about hope, means talking about our people, our community, from the archipelago to the diaspora. We need to continue building the bridge between our Puerto Rican community here and there. We are just one people, and we need each other to transform the political and economic reality in the archipelago. I will finish my participation encouraging the Latino and Puerto Rican audience to push with our voices, our power, our privilege as academics for transforming the life of people here and there without fear, naming the real roots of the producers of violation of human rights, social and health injustice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rivera Diaz. Very powerful. You've given us lots of information to think about, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss these very important aspects later in the question and answer session. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Catherine Medina from the University of Connecticut School of Social Work. She's the Associate Professor Emeriti. She's a social work educator committed to studying the influence of social determinants of health and well-being of diverse populations. The depth of her scholarship crosses many research areas, both nationally and internationally. She's the author of several articles and chapters on health and mental health equity, health disparities in communities of color, interprofessional and integrative collaboration, practice, and gender-informed policy implementation. She was also a coordinator at the UConn for the Puerto Rican travel study with the University of Puerto Rico Graduate School of Social Work for 13 years. This program exposed and trained social work graduate students about the history, richness, self-empowerment of Puerto Rican people in meeting their everyday challenges while learning about social work practice in Puerto Rico. Since 2010, her global scholarship has been developed around practice of social work in Vietnam, working as a social work policy consultant and a clinical trainer in Hanoi, Dalat, and Da Nang. In 2013 and 2014, she was a visiting professor at the National University of Vietnam in their social work department and taught micro and macro theories in social work practice within the Vietnamese context. Her social work experience includes working in several health-related facilities, such as hospitals, mental health and substance abuse community-based agencies, homeless day treatment programs, schools, and law-based clinics, providing direct service and leadership through diverse clinical and administrative roles. Her current focus of research intersects on developing an inclusive society for women, essential workers, hospice care patients, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, Dr. Medina's presentation will focus on the strengths of the Puerto Rican people amidst 4 coexisting natural and man-made environmental disasters. Threats and pressures on the environment and its resources amplify inequality and power imbalances in communities, as outlined by our previous presenter.
Okay. I think Dr. Thomas is frozen.
The concept of collaborative self-empowerment, lots of work to be done, a work in progress. It is within this belief system that women express their power and actively create spaces to promote a sense of commitment and hope. At this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Medina to make her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Thank you, Milagros. Thank you, Abigail. And of course, Maria Nilda. Thank you so much for setting the context, the history, the struggles of our Puerto Rican people. I know for me, it's a little bit different in the sense that Maria Nilda is in Puerto Rico and I am in New York. Yet, you know, my summers were always in Puerto Rico. It was like my summer camp from very little, from 6 years old to about 22 years old. I used to go to Puerto Rico every summer. So, you know, I feel your presentation, Maria Nilda. I just want to say that because I know sometimes the going is very rough and la lucha is a big struggle. I'm going to talk from a different perspective, and I want to say buenas noches, good evening, happy Heritage Month, Latino Heritage Month. And I'm so happy to be here with the UConn community. You know, it was my home for 15 years, and it still is my home in many ways. So I want to start, like I start every class, with a question. Amidst 4 coexisting environmental disasters, how does Puerto Rico find hope? You know, that's a question that as I continue to present, I want you to think about. I will cover, and I know Maria Nilda has covered some of this, but I will cover it from a different perspective. I will cover the 4 natural man-made disasters in Puerto Rico from 2016 to the present, and they are as follows. Hurricane Irma and Maria, Puerto Rico police responsiveness to intimate partner violence, Promesa, and the last one will be COVID. And I will look at these 4 natural man-made disasters, their impact on the archipelago of Puerto Rico, and how women have led in meeting the challenges through self-empowerment. Why do these disasters matter? Often, natural and man-made environmental disasters are the result of human error, accident, lack of foresight, fiscal austerity, greed, denial of the need for human intervention. According to the World Health Organization, disasters disrupt the physical and social environments that shape health and health problems. Now, no one better than social work knows about the person in environment. And I think Dr. Rivera Diaz did a great job in talking about the person in their environment, their political, economic, social environments. Well, this frame suggests that environmental disasters occur in the interaction of physical forces within social structures and power relationships in everyday life. This dynamic interaction has led Puerto Rican women to find their inner strength to meet collective challenges. Women have used their voices and their bodies as a call to action. Today, Dr. Rivera Diaz used her voice as a call to action. Their asserting their self-power has promoted grassroots movements and collaboration with political leaders, government agencies, and stakeholders towards gender equality and a just society. I suggest that Hurricane Irma and Maria are both natural and man-made disasters. We know that Puerto Rico was ravaged by these 2 disasters, and that in 2017, Hurricane Irma was a Category 5 storm which struck Puerto Rico, leaving 1 million residents without power, 3 people dead. 2/3 of the island was without power, 56,000 people didn't have drinkable water, and an estimated $1 billion of damages further impacted Puerto Rico's fragile physical infrastructure and natural environmental systems. Boom, 2 weeks later, Hurricane Maria, it went from September 19 to September 21 with 155-mile winds, just staying steadily, slowly around the island, covering 100 miles of land, 30 inches of rain, and leaving a path of destruction. Maria primarily destroyed the power grid, the infrastructure, roads, access to transportation, water, communication, access to the police and courts. A Harvard study estimates that the official account was exactly 4,645. I know other numbers, like 3,000 was thrown around, but the actual was much higher because remember, a lot of these deaths were not reported until later because of the devastation left on the island. The mortality rate increased by 62%, and the interruption of medical care was the primary cause of the high mortality rate. The same report indicates that on average, the Puerto Rican American citizen was left 84 days without electricity, 68 days without water, 41 days without cell service, and in the rural area, it was worse. 83% of households were out of electricity for over 366 days. In addition, the residents experienced a lack of food, housing, transportation, and financial resources. It was the longest blackout in US history. Some of you may remember in Connecticut when we had a power outage of less than a week and what that felt like. Now you could imagine no light, living in darkness for rural people for over 366 days. Hurricane Irma and Maria left Puerto Rico in a state of emergency, and a particular population was left out: intimate partner violence survivors who found themselves in more vulnerable situations than ever before without access to telecommunication, shelters, the police, legal, medical, and mental health services. The archipelago was facing problems of historic magnitude regarding the provision and coordination of service providers for women survivors of gender-based violence. Maria caused over 93 to 100 billion in damages. When I travel to Puerto Rico, I often hear many Puerto Rican people view everyday language or everyday existence as before Maria or after Maria. They say, you see, Maria, we say, Maria, it's as if she is present. She's like a person reminding us of our vulnerability in meeting basic needs, of having a home, clean water, food, safety, a communication system, access to healthcare, transportation, and electricity. Hey, but the United States did intervene. Trump's action against such devastation was to throw paper towel at the Puerto Rican people, to send a company of 2 men to rebuild the power grid, and to withhold congressional funding to Puerto Rico of $8 million to build his wall. The Biden administration recently released $1.3 billion in aid to protect against future climate disasters. They are in the process of removing some restrictions put in by Trump's administration on January 20th, the same day that Trump left the office of the presidency. The second man-made disaster was a lack of Puerto Rico police responsiveness to intimate partner violence. And this needs to really be mentioned because in 2012, the US Department of Justice, a federal department, investigated and highlighted that the Puerto Rican Police Department did not have standard police practices or procedures and was violating the rights of the Puerto Rican people, of its own people. A major violation was the inadequate handling of sexual assault and domestic violence cases. Puerto Rico has the world's highest per capita intimate partner violence murder rates for women older than 14, and this rate has increased post-Maria. The number of women killed by their partners doubled after Hurricane Maria. Yet, Puerto Rico has Law 54, which is a model landmark legislation. South America looks at this legislation, and so do other states, because it's ambitious and comprehensive approach to domestic violence. It recognizes the seriousness of violence against women and also the criminalization component. The law provides legal shelter and opportunity for self-development and self-empowerment through social service involvement. The lack of priority given to IPV is noted in police underreporting, and because the police view IPV as a private family issue. I have to add that the police department in Puerto Rico itself has a high intimate partner violence rate. They get about 1,500 complaints against their own police force in 5 years. The third disaster is a man-made disaster, and Dr. Rivera Diaz commented on promesa, which means promise. And it came before the hurricanes, but it's very active in promoting not only privatization, but the interests of different lobbying groups. It was enacted in 2016 by President Obama to really handle the Puerto Rico debt that it owes when the United States is the one making the decisions about finance, and it owed $74 million. So Provesa, which is called by the local people La Junta, and by other people, the Oversight Board. And it's a law that was put into effect. And it has extensive authority over Puerto Rico's debt restructuring, fiscal planning, budget approval, contracts, and pension liabilities. As such, the board has a great deal of power and fiscal control over the infrastructure, revitalization, and investments under austerity and neoliberal politics. Although the Puerto Rican governor submits a budget to La Junta, the La Junta could reject it and create their own budget for the people of Puerto Rico. The intent of the law was to adjust and reorganize Puerto Rico's debt to empower the people through control of their lives. I want to say that Professor Gartrell Orbit, which is part of UPR, refers to promesa as legislation with plenary power, austerity measures, with a colony as a recipient and dictated by the word of man or of men. There are 6 men and 1 woman on this board. It also concerns the spaces, the agency and rage that women themselves adopt in the struggle. I thought she said it nicely, has plenary power, austerity measures for a colony that's a recipient dictated by the word of men. The fourth is the pandemic, COVID-19. Puerto Rico acted quickly and was able to mandate, the closures and curfews on the island. So non-essential businesses, schools, cruise ships were prevented from coming on the island. Pretty much everything was on lockdown. In spring of 2021, there were 94,336 cases and 2,073 deaths on the island for a population of 3 million people. Puerto Rico, I have to say, and this is hopeful, Puerto Rico has the highest rate of vaccination for COVID in the United States, okay? Puerto Rico has a 90% COVID-19 vaccination rate, which is 15 points higher than the national average. And why is that? I would say it's because of women. I would say women get their families to get vaccinated. We know the research shows that men lack in getting healthcare. But this progressive movement of random mandates also has unintended consequences. For example, it has consequences for those living with an abuser. Researchers found that the stress induced by economic insecurity, quarantine, social isolation, and reduced health services availability contributed to the increase in violence against women and children. So as you hear, La Lucha, the struggle in Puerto Rico, is very challenging. It is within the intersectionality of these disasters, especially after Maria, that women understand that they no longer fear, that they know their power because they survived so much adversity. After 4 disasters, their intrinsic self-powerment enables them to fight back against oppression, colonialism, class discrimination, patriarchy, misogyny, and an unjust gendered society. But unlike feminist movements in other parts of the world, in this archipelago, this movement is horizontal, massive, and has no leader. According to Sandra Guzman, a journalist, there are hundreds and thousands of women across the island, all ages and backgrounds, that participate in the slow but steady revolution. Many of the women on the front lines being pelted, gassed, and confronted by riot police. Others are quiet behind the scenes, working in their communities, tending to farms, leading community workshops, healing and educating. We don't leave the elderly behind or the older adults that are too frail or too sick to protest, but they cook meals, and boy, do they cook good. And they counsel the younger women. They are conscious that every woman has the power to impact a social transformation. If there's a face to the feminist movement in Puerto Rico, it is La Colectiva Feminista en Construcción. A few years ago, Ferre, a Black queer feminist activist from Aguadilla, came together with 6 compañeras, friends or colleagues, and they began discussing intersectionality and how they could work together to build a better Puerto Rico. Together, they created a space where they decolonized themselves, meaning they reclaimed their Taino and African lineages and self-identities and tried to figure out different approaches for sustainable change. Women are fighting back with hope against the injustices through a women's self-empowerment movement. I heard one of the chats before, and enough is enough. Basta. They are yelling, basta, ya basta, enough. Self-empowerment involves the ability to know your potential, your possibility, your hopes, your capability of doing or accomplishing something. Having your own sense of energy, having your own sense of energy. Self-empowerment is intrinsic and it's a deeper inner self. No one gives you power. You need to develop it yourself. Remember, if you think another person gives you power, then you're dependent and they can take it away because you owe them. The most common way that people give up their power is by thinking that they don't have any. Thank you, Alice Walker. Puerto Rican women's hope comes from their awareness, consciousness of self-power, and their ability to lead the charge for transformational change. They're realistic about 2 things: lots of work to be done, and it is a work in progress. They have taken their courses to the street, the towns, and to Washington. One of their biggest accomplishments was the resignation of Governor Ricky Rosselló after his administration, he and his administration put out some monogamous and homophobic chats, and there was a big scandal about this. The women activists view forcing this governor's resignation as a step towards women's rights and women's equity. Women activists are raising awareness through a call to action and pushing the new governor, which he did, to declare a state of emergency given the crises of gender violence. They led the governor to sign an executive order for a national plan to end gender violence, which includes a task force, representatives from more than a dozen agencies, to develop a government-wide strategy to combat violence against women. Direct public and private sectors must take specific steps. The Department of Education will implement a curriculum to teach students about gender violence at a young age. The Attorney General's office will develop new training for prosecutors handling cases, and those prosecutors have to appear in court to defend women's rights. The island's police will update their protocol for responding to domestic violence calls and for investigating the unsolved cases of murdered women. Getting the Promesa Oversight Board to approve a $7 million budget for different programs that are aimed at prevention around gender-based violence. They are pushing a feminist narrative agenda, getting equal pay, eradicating discrimination in the workplace, and sexual harassment. But their latest lucha for women in Puerto Rico comes just the other day, because after 4 years of waiting for Hurricane Maria recovery and to fix their power grid, of which many residents and environmental advocates were calling for clean energy sources, because Puerto Rico depends on 97% of its electricity from fossil fuel right now. Power is privatized, expensive, and unreliable. Well, FEMA on Monday announced that it will spend $9.4 billion on fossil fuel infrastructure instead of renewed energy power grid, without doing an environmental impact statement or considering other alternatives. A decision that was approved by this oversight board, although Puerto Rico has laws around climate change and calls for generating 40% of electricity from renewable sources by 2025. Puerto Rico has once in a lifetime chance to build back better with clean energy. This will be the women's next fight for power, and that's a pun, for power. My last paragraph, and this is about the implication for social workers. Within this profession, we usually use words like self-awareness, self-actualization, self-realization, self-love, self-care, but never self-empowerment. Is that because we look at disadvantaged communities, individuals, and populations within them as vulnerable rather than persons in vulnerable situations? Each of us has a unique self-power. As social workers, we work with others to build trust, honesty, engagement, and often explore intimate details of others' lives. Yet we don't easily discuss or understand their social construction of power and a person's autonomy to be aware, free, liberated because of this inner source of strength. Self-empowerment that works to find solutions for challenges. Self-empowerment is the hope of being, having agency, and creating a space for gender justice and a just society. Thank you. And I want to thank Aaliyah Henry. I don't know if she's a participant today, but she and I wrote an article on these disasters, these natural man-made disasters, and some of the paper reflects that. So thank you, Aaliyah. Thank you.
Thank you. This was such an excellent presentation. It was full of useful, thoughtful, integrative, personal, and information that sort of hit us to the very core. I'm going to ask to see if there are any questions that are in the chat. And again, just my deep gratitude for such an excellent presentation.
Dr. Thomas, all right, there is one. It says, it is important to note that there's yet another disaster.
So while Milagros is compiling them, I will ask one of the questions that came up is, what roles can social workers play in both the resistance and activism to reduce the disasters, the climate change issues, domestic violence issues, economic deprivation, lack of access to health and health inequality? What role can social workers play in a very interdisciplinary, powerful movement?
Marianita, you want me to answer that one? And then, okay. You know, social workers have a really unique place in society. And, you know, we have this Build Back Better agenda from President Biden. And I would urge social workers to be part of the movement with Puerto Rico to try to get renewable energy as a source of power for Puerto Rico. That's going to be on the horizon, and that's a new issue. I saw that one of the chats was the idea that someone did a dissertation in 1987, and some of the same issues keep cropping up in Puerto Rico. As long as Puerto Rico is a colony subjected to the United States in relationship to its trade, guys, you never see anything made in Puerto Rico in the United States. You never do you? Do you see that label? We make coffee, we make garments, we make all kinds of things in Puerto Rico. But the minute they're made in Puerto Rico, they carry the US garment label. So Puerto Rico is at the privatization of the US government in relationship to trade, in relation to any kind of development. So social work, we have a place. You know, you see in Connecticut, you see large numbers of Puerto Ricans that, you know, have traveled from the island to stateside, and you have those that never traveled to Puerto Rico. I would begin to really look at their sense of self-empowerment too, because I think that holds us back. The minute we rely on somebody for power, we're not going to have it because we're dependent and we can't call the shots. That's just my answer. I don't know, Marianilda.
Well, I think that the great thing about our profession, being social workers, is the capacity that we have to understand how those structural factors, impact the daily life of our people. And we have the capacity also to work in different levels. I remember when the hurricanes and those emergencies, the College of Professional Social Work, as well the university, the Department of Social Work from different universities, took the streets and they were providing individual services, direct services, but also there's a group of people that have been also advocating in the policy sphere, not only locally, but also in DC. So I think that that's the most amazing opportunity that we as a social worker, that we can work in different levels of intervention has to transform the reality of our people, and also impact and transform, at least to contribute to transform the social, political, and economic reality of the people. So I think that's my reflection on that question.
I just want to say too that, it was a humanitarian effort to get the US Navy out of Vieques. And when we made it a human rights issue, after 60 years of the US Navy being in Vieques, this little island of Puerto Rico was able to say, basta, you're out of here. Okay. Now, I'm not saying, that the US-Puerto Rico relationship is not important, because it is. Everything is tied in. It's, immersed. But I think social workers As social workers, we have to raise awareness, consciousness, and action. You don't know how many times I have written to Congress, appeared in Washington as a social worker to help fight these battles. So as a role is the idea of raise consciousness, raise awareness, and take some action.
Mm-hmm. I see it. Thank you so much. I see another question here. It's from your other colleague, Dr. Negroni. She says, can you both elaborate on how we can decolonize ourselves and its connection to the resistance and self-empowerment?
You want to go first, Marianita?
Wow, video. Making these incredible questions. I think how we can decolonize ourselves. Well, I think that we have, okay, that's, I'm talking about myself. I'm going to talk about my own experience, no? Some things that I have been very engaged with is start looking as academic, start looking more to the South. And when I say to the South, I say to Latin American and the Caribbean. And I think that that history is out of our sight because our colonial status always, we have been, you can hear in the academia always seeing like quoting and reading articles and from US, and that's the way it is, and this is the science that we had to adopt, and this is the truth, no, and this is the reality, and this is the only word. So what have been done for the last years is start vinculated with other researchers from the Latin American and the Caribbean, and that opportunity helped me to open my mind to see other experience, other reality that ironically is a reality that is more similar to my reality, my own history, no? Because the history of Latin America also is a history of colonization, of exploitation. So, and that opened a lot of opportunity for me to transform also the way I teach in my classroom, the readings that I provide to my students. No, so that's an example that I wanted to share. Also, I had to be very aware how the racism, the colonialism, no, make us and build us, our personality, and the way that we think, the way that we see the world. So I am I'm trying to reflect on how racism, sexism, classism, no, impact the way that we thought and the way that we behave in our daily basis. So yeah.
I can add, Lirio, so good to hear your voice. I hear it in my ear. But I would say for me, and I think, it goes back to the idea that self-empowerment is intrinsic. We all have power. We just have to know it, be conscious of it, and take it and liberate ourselves, because it's nothing like the feeling when you self-power, you create this energy and you liberate yourself in such a way that you have such clearness and clarity in your thinking that you're able to find solutions. For me, that means reclaiming my many cultural selves, but also getting in deep about my heritage, which is Taino, African-American, and Afro, and also being a New Yorker, what does that mean? And how do I have privilege, but also how I have the self-power that I don't have to depend on anybody to support it. It's mine for the taking. It's mine for the energy that's going to liberate me from feeling the control that all different structural arrangements try to create for different citizenry in the name of oppression. So that's my answer anyhow.
I'm sorry, did we lose you, Dr. Medina? Did you finish your thought?
I did finish my thought.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Because I don't want to take up so much time. You know,
Okay.
I can talk like a good Latina. I can talk a lot, but I want to be respectful.
Milagros, did you wanted to add something? I thought you said something in the chat.
No, we do have other questions in the chat.
Okay.
Did we raise the one, Dr. Medina, there's a question if you can share the name of the article that you wrote.
Okay. It's under review, which means it's not public yet, so I can't tell you. But the minute it gets published, and things now are taking 9 months to a year before you hear, Aaliyah and I could put an email out to Milagros, and you could share it with people, especially people that attended today. But I think it's a great article. I don't talk about self-empowerment in that article with Aaliyah, but we do talk about Puerto Rico and resistance.
Just to bring it home, there's a final question given time. So we were wondering, how can we bring this home to Connecticut? We have a large Puerto Rican community here in Connecticut. We recognize the circular migration that happens. And so it's important for our social worker practitioners and students with Puerto Rican people here in Connecticut. Just responses from either one of you or both, please.
Dr. Thomas, can you repeat the question because you were freezing?
I'm sorry. I was asking, like, you had such valuable information about Puerto Rico and the situation in Puerto Rico and the activism and action that is occurring. How can we inform our students, our practitioners, our colleagues here in Connecticut, because we understand that the circular migration of Puerto Ricans, right? So that we have a large Puerto Rican community here in Connecticut, and the information that you shared with us, how can we bring it home to our local communities here in Connecticut?
Do you want me to start, Marianita? Okay. This is the first, and it's great that I'm presenting with someone who's in Puerto Rico, living in Puerto Rico, and a citizen of the Republic of Puerto Rico, if I could put it that way. But anyhow, in terms of Connecticut, I think it's so important. Hartford, Connecticut, the last time that I looked, 44% of the population was Puerto Rican. It's probably higher now because I haven't looked at those numbers in a while. And there's nothing like opening the school to the community. But with COVID, I know that that's so difficult. And I think so many things have been put on hold because of COVID that, I think in any way that the school can make some awareness and some consciousness and some, joining Puerto Rico in their quest for political reform, economic reform, social reform, I think it would be really important. I know in the past, the Puerto Rican Latino Studies Project used to take, a stand or a position on certain things as scholars, individual scholars within the project. We would take positions to work with Puerto Rico and also the diaspora here, which is a big one. There's so many people from Puerto Rico, and I know Dr. Thomas refers to it as a circular migration. I call it the back and forth migration because there's so much back and forth. And it's really important that with this migration, we really don't let Puerto Ricans, whether it's stateside or on the island, forget the culture, forget the history, maintain its language, which is so important. I think there's so much richness, and I think regarding La Lucha and the struggles of the Puerto Rican people, we are very aware and conscious that we have a very rich culture and history, even though we've been subjected to colonialization. We still maintain 2 flags, 2 languages, 2 identities, many identities really, 2 constitutions, which makes us a stronger culture because we're so much more open to different perspectives. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think with COVID, the idea, we used to always open up the school for the community, and I just hope that continues. I know that the school has a program where it deals with the Department of Family and Children's Services, and Milagros probably knows a lot more about this than I do, but there's been some collaboration between UConn School of Social Work and the Department of Family and Children's Services, to make sure that there's cultural awareness or cultural consciousness about children and families of Puerto Rican backgrounds. So that's just basically, I think, I just hope we could be like Puerto Rico and get 90% vaccination rates in the United States. Okay, Nina just sent me 44 Hispanic population in Hartford. Thank you, Nina. I thought it was about that. So anyhow, when I left, it was 42, which was in 2019. So anyhow.
I think there are 2 other questions, and one that I totally missed. The question is, it's important to note that there is yet another disaster due to frail energy infrastructure and privatization. Further disaster, capitalism has made itself present through corrupt and opportunistic initiatives. What are the tools available to social work for promoting resilience and empowerment in a colonial context, and including self-empowerment? Perhaps Dr. Rivera Diaz could answer this question.
Wow. That's loaded, by the way. It's a loaded question.
I think that there's no tools. I mean, that's my opinion, no, but there's no tools. I think that there's things to do. And I think that the best tools is on the streets, no? Going and working with groups, community organizations, social movement, get involved with those causes and fights for the human rights of people. So something like tools, I don't know, Kathy, if you have like that answer.
I have a tool.
Do you have a tool?
Self-empowerment. In my toolbox, I have a tool. You hear that all the time now. Where's your tool in your toolbox? My tool is professional use of self. And, there's so many organizations in Puerto Rico, Mujeres en Resistencia, La Colectiva, Movimientos Amplios, Proyecto Matria. There's just so many. There's at least 12 organizations in Puerto Rico that you could be a part of. Mm-hmm. Even with the long distance, you could still be a part of them. I keep in touch with all their newsletters, with all their blogs. So for me, it's always having that consciousness and that awareness of the Puerto Rican culture and the Puerto Rican struggle of La Lucha, which keeps me very much interested. But there's nothing like the use of self. And, you know, I won't get into empowerment because, you know, students that have had me know that I don't believe in empowerment because it implies permission for power. Mm-hmm. I believe in self-empowerment, which is a very different concept, which I firmly believe in, and I talked about it today. So use of self, getting active with these organizations, be conscious, having the awareness, and getting into the protests or the political, economic, social lucha, struggles of Puerto Rico, Puerto Rican people, of the Puerto Rican people in Connecticut. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, we can continue our conversations, but I know time is fast fleeting. Do we have time for one more question? And the question is, how do we? Two questions actually. There's two parts to the question. First question is, the collaboration and the work that started with UConn and UPR. What is the status and that this program that was initiated by Dr. Julio Morales and Dr. Negroni, and I think Dr. Barreto maybe. So like what are the next steps? Do we still continue this great programming that occurs? And the second question was about how do we make people aware of the rich culture, cultural heritage, cultural sensitivity? So you can take either of those questions, and perhaps after that we will bring this meeting to a close. So.
Maria Lula.
Well, with the question that made about the status of the program between the UConn and Puerto Rico, I have no idea because I'm not in the School of Social Work. I am in the School of Public Health. So I have no idea. I don't know if that, Kathy, do you have any idea of the status of that?
Yeah. Okay, it's funny because Dean Nina Heller and I were in contact recently about the Puerto Rico travel study. And I think we have a forum to discuss that. And she's basically discussing it. It's in discussion. And there's more to follow, more news to follow, but it has been on the table, the discussion. The other thing is that I just want to say that I lost my train of thought. That happens these days, doesn't it? But in any case, I think there'll be more to come regarding the exchange. I did meet with Estela, who's the director and coordinated the Puerto Rico travel in Puerto Rico. I met with her this year. We were fortunate to get together, and we're both very interested. And, she's still in, as far as I know. But, with COVID, it has been difficult to plan anything. But it's in discussion, if I could put it that way, with more to follow.
And I do believe that, there is a vast amount of research that our colleagues and professors, Christina, who's been writing a lot about, I think it was the fatherhood initiatives. So there's continuous, research, thought, and Milagros has been organizing and several programs. And so there's been a considerable amount of effort, thought, to continue the work that was started by Julio, but then also carried out by Latina faculty, and then, the legacy lives. And we'll continue to live.
Well, that's what we were asking for, that our legacy exists, because it's very rich.
So, well, I may perhaps if Milagros, do you have any last minute comments, ideas, thoughts?
I do. Honestly, this was such a profound presentation that I found I didn't want to blink because I thought I was going to miss something. It was, phenomenal. And so I want to thank both of you for being with us this evening, because just from the comments from our audience, everyone is so grateful, and they have sensed the passion and the commitment, that you both have with your work and your knowledge and your expertise. And we can't thank you enough. I couldn't even summarize what you even talked about, because it was just so rich in nature and so touching. And I think for me, Dr. Medina, what really resonated me the most was when you even compared the outage we experienced here in the States for such a short period of time, but for us was eternity, compared to what our people in Puerto Rico had faced, right? Day by day, and just finding that resiliency to continuing to live and live with hope. And I can't thank my people enough, because I couldn't even imagine, being in those shoes, and just really speaks to just who we are as a people and a community. And I can't thank you enough for sharing that message with us, because I think all too often in those moments of adversity, we forget our own strength. We forget, who we are as a people. Like you said, Kathy, that self-empowerment, like just taking control. And I just thank you so much for everything that you shared today. This recording will be available for everyone who registered and who was in attendance. The recording will take about a week or so, but you will receive it, and please share with others. Help us to educate others, and I think the most message that stood out to me the most too with Dr. Rivera Diaz was even speaking to the dignity and worth of who we are as a people, right? And how that aligns with our code of ethics, and just reminding people of that. So it just, hit me in so many different ways, to the core of my roots of a social worker, but just as a fellow Puertorriqueña, and I just thank you for it.
Yeah. If I could just say one more comment, and it's because my friend Lirio, my colleague, reminded me, we always teach from the perspective of develop, think outside of the box. And I don't teach from that perspective. I say, create a new box. Because if you create out of the box, it's still the same box. It's still the same ingredients that you're using. So please, create a new box. See how you can raise the hope and the power that you have within yourselves to promote a humane and equity in different systems and structures, but also in our island, in our
I think we're reminded that we need to be bringing this meeting to a close, given the need to improve our infrastructure where we have better technological ways without being frozen. Thank you for your patience, and we really, really appreciate both your thoughtful presentation. I know a lot of hard work went into both the combination, the conversations, and the collective thought. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Thomas.
Right.
Adios.